Amsterdam in early autumn was always beautiful. The leaves along the canals had just begun to turn gold, and the crisp air carried the scent of cinnamon pastries from corner cafes. Lisbeth wrapped her scarf tighter as she crossed the narrow bridge near her flat, clutching the cream-colored envelope in her hand. The invitation was simple but elegant. It was for a baby shower, hosted by her older brother Bram and his new wife, Saskia. Lisbeth hesitated before tucking the envelope into her coat pocket. She hadn't spoken much to Bram lately. Not since Saskia came into the picture. Saskia was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone feel underdressed. Sharp heels, sharper words. Her smiles were sweet, but they never quite reached her eyes. And Lisbeth, with her love of books and pastries, had become an easy target. Still, she would go.
For Bram.
2 days later, she stepped into the townhouse in Oud West where the shower was held. The space was decorated in soft whites and muted greens, minimalist and picture-perfect, just like Saskia. Classical music played low in the background, and clusters of well-dressed guests mingled around organic juice bars and platters of gluten-free tarts. Lisbeth spotted Bram across the room. He looked happy, a little thinner maybe, but his face lit up when he saw her. They hugged, brief but warm. Saskia arrived shortly after, her bump barely visible under a tailored ivory dress. "Darling, I didn't think you'd come," Saskia said, kissing the air beside Lisbeth's cheek. Her perfume was overpowering, floral, and expensive. "I wouldn't miss it," Lisbeth replied with a smile. Saskia's eyes drifted down to Lisbeth's waistline, and then she added, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "We were just talking about how tricky it can be to stay fit during these colder months. Some of us handle it better than others, don't we?" A few people laughed politely. Lisbeth felt her stomach tighten. She reached for a tiny spinach tart and popped it in her mouth without a word. Saskia turned her attention elsewhere, satisfied, as if she'd just marked her territory. Lisbeth breathed slowly. She wouldn't respond. Not yet. But she had a secret. A piece of information Saskia would never want anyone in this room to hear. And maybe, just maybe, it was time someone reminded her that not everything filtered through Instagram was real. She looked around. The party had only just begun. Lisbeth moved through the room, exchanging polite pleasantries. She noticed the subtle ways guests aligned themselves with Saskia, their smiles tinged with approval. Yet beneath every laugh was a sharp edge. Saskia slipped away momentarily, heading to the juice bar. Lisbeth seized the opportunity and approached Bram. "Are you all right?" she whispered. Bram's smile faltered. Saskia and I aren't always on the same page," he said softly. Before Lisbeth could reply, Saskia returned, placing a hand on Bram's arm and offering Lisbeth a lukewarm smile. She then turned to follow a server carrying berry blends. Lisbeth looked Bram in the eyes. A silent conversation passed between them. Protect ourselves, but not ruin this for baby. The music swelled as Saskia began to speak about how motherhood was the perfect opportunity to reset one's life. It was only when she laughed again, calling someone blessed with self-control, that Lisbeth felt something shift inside her. She tucked her secret deeper, waiting for the right moment. Later, guests gathered in the cozy parlor for a storytelling game. Each person shared advice for the expecting mother. When it was Saskia's turn, she recounted her gym routine, her kale smoothies, her determination to bounce back quickly after childbirth. Lisbeth watched the subtle envy in the crowd's eyes. Then it was Bram's turn. He spoke from the heart, praising Saskia's support, her discipline, her elegance, everything a sister could envy. Now it was Lisbeth. She cleared her throat and said softly, "I think the best thing we can remind ourselves of is authenticity." A hush fell. We live in a world that tries so hard to be perfect. But real life isn't perfect. It's messy. It's beautiful and sometimes painful. Eyes followed her, some curious, others unsettled. And just as she was about to continue, the doorbell rang. Everyone paused. Bram excused himself to answer. Lisbeth watched as he opened the door to reveal Saskia's friend, Marieke, from the cosmetic surgery clinic across town. Marieke entered gracefully, her presence almost clinical. She greeted Saskia with professional warmth. Lisbeth's heart thumped. She recognized Marique's name. She was the surgeon behind Saskia's transformation. The air filled with curious murmurs as Marique took a seat. Saskia beamed, unaware that its arrival was more than coincidences. Marique spoke in careful tones about post-operative self-care. Saskia nodded, glowing. Guests thought it was just good parenting advice. Lisbeth saw the threads of what she held unraveling. What was Marique doing here? The conversation flowed, ostensibly about skincare and recovery exercises after childbirth. Yet Lisbeth sensed an undercurrent, observation, perhaps evaluation. Marique complimented Saskia on her composure. Saskia smiled but turned slightly pale. Lisbeth leaned forward, heart pounding. Was this the moment her secret would find company? When Marique suggested they take a few photos to mark progress, Saskia nodded. A photographer emerged. The group pressed closer. Lisbeth watched as Saskia posed, her hand gently stroking her abdomen while Marique quietly directed her posture. Lisbeth's chest tightened. She wondered, would this be the catalyst? Once the photos were done, tension rose. Saskia's smile flickered. She excused herself for water and Bram followed. Lisbeth spotted them in the hallway. She lingered strategically near the doorway, straining to hear. Saskia hissed, "Why did you invite her?" Bram replied, "She's just a friend and a doctor." The word doctor struck home. If Saskia lied about having natural curves, it was because they came at a cost. Lisbeth could almost hear the unspoken battles of insecurity. She backed away uncertain. She had no proof yet. But she had something far more powerful, timing. Lisbeth returned to the parlor where guests chatted about baby names. She feigned interest while marshalling her courage. At that moment, the host called for a toast. Glasses of sparkling elderflower cordial were raised in celebration. Lisbeth knew this was her moment too. She stood and tapped her glass gently. The room grew silent. She spoke deliberately. To honesty, because real strength lies in authenticity, not applause. There was polite applause. Saskia's jaw tightened. Lisbeth paused, letting the silence stretch. Inside, Saskia's eyes flitted toward Marique and Bram. Lisbeth wondered whether Marique would say anything, and whether Saskia would. Saskia rose, as though to protest. But Marique spoke first. Authenticity has its own healing power. The words landed, softly, deliberately. Lisbeth felt the tension crack. She smiled faintly and held Saskia's gaze. Guards began to fall. Guests murmured. Saskia's composure struggled against the tide. Bram stepped forward. "We're all here for the baby. For this family." His words were gentle but firm. The weight of expectation bore down on Saskia. Lisbeth stayed silent, but her secret was close to surface. Moments later, a hush again. Lisbeth took a breath. It was time. She paused. And then, she said softly but clearly, "Saskia, your support has been incredible this season, especially when you quietly recovered at Marique's clinic." Gasps. Eyes widened. Saskia froze. Lisbeth continued, "It's brave to rebuild quietly, but also wrong to judge others publicly." The room shimmered with tension. Saskia's face shifted, anger, shame, and uncertainty fighting for control. Lisbeth took a steadying breath. All eyes on Saskia. She swallowed, her hands trembling slightly. Bram stepped forward, wrapping his arm around her. "Whatever you did, I support you. But Lisbeth has a point. Kindness must come first." Saskia's eyes filled. She looked at Lisbeth, then Marique. She nodded slowly, the tension leaking away. The room stood in a fragile silence. Lisbeth watched Saskia compose herself, realizing that this confrontation wasn't an argument. It was a turning point. Saskia said, voice low, "You're right." And in that moment, Lisbeth felt the walls shift. The baby shower would go on, only now, under a different light. One of truth, not performance.